Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Adapting an iconic book for the screen is no easy task. Screenwriters and directors constantly have to balance staying true to the original with making the story dynamic, clear, and visually striking. Unsurprisingly, the Harry Potter adaptations faced the same challenges. A common criticism is that many interesting scenes and subplots from the books were cut. For example, the longest book, Order of the Phoenix, became the shortest film. But today I want to defend the filmmakers. Let's take a closer look at why some of the moments that didn't make it into the movies were actually cut for good reasons. Enjoy watching. Number 1. The final battle. In the book, Harry and Voldemort's climactic duel unfolds right in front of everyone in the Great Hall. The two circle each other while everyone watches in silence. Harry explicitly tells Voldemort where he went wrong and why he will lose. It's a dialogue-heavy scene that's perfect for a novel. But film demands visual tension and momentum. The creators realized that a long, verbal duel could weaken the climax on screen. So in the movie, their fight happens in private, with no witnesses and minimal dialogue. This keeps the tension high and the visuals compelling without lengthy explanations. Number 2. Harry walking into the forest alone. This moment in the book is incredibly powerful thanks to Harry's internal monologue. The reader lives through his fear and resolve. After seeing Snape's memories, Harry knows he must sacrifice himself. He goes to the forest alone without saying a word to his friends. But a film can't directly show his thoughts. The directors had to find another way to communicate the gravity of the moment. They changed the scene so Harry explains the plan to Hermione and Ron before leaving. This gives viewers emotional closure and makes his decision clear without voiceover. Number 3. All the Horcrux memories. In the books, Dumbledore carefully shows Harry many memories of the Dark Lord. We learn about Voldemort's mother, how he found Hufflepuff's cup, and how he returned to Hogwarts seeking a teaching post. The filmmakers had to cut much of this. There was simply too much material, and including it all would have slowed the movie's pace dramatically. They kept only the most crucial memories to maintain the film's momentum and focus on the main plot. Number 4. Harry's rage. After Sirius's death in Order of the Phoenix, the book spends a lot of time on Harry's grief and anger. He smashes Dumbledore's office in rage. His thoughts convey absolute emptiness and despair. The film can't show this internal monologue so easily. Just breaking furniture isn't the same as letting us into Harry's head, so this scene was either cut or made much more restrained. The creators felt that without the book's internal narration, it wouldn't have the same impact. Number 5. The Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. In the books, Hermione founds an organization to free house elves. It's prompted by a scene in the Hogwarts kitchen where the characters see hundreds of elves cooking. But for the film, this subplot was deemed too expensive and labor-intensive. Showing hundreds of CGI elves would have required huge resources. Plus, this storyline isn't critical to the main fight against Voldemort, so they cut it to keep the focus on the core story. Number 6. The Quidditch World Cup. Filming Quidditch matches is extremely costly and complicated. Every second on broomsticks requires serious effects work, so the filmmakers had to cut many of the extra matches, even those important to the characters. For instance, Order of the Phoenix dropped Quidditch entirely, even though it affected Harry and Ron's friendship. In Goblet of Fire, we only see the arrival at the match and its aftermath, with the game itself cut. Yes, the final was spectacular and important for world building, but not essential to Harry's personal arc. Number 7. The Marauders' backstory. Prisoner of Azkaban was the first film to really cut significant details from the book. For example, the Marauders' backstory is almost entirely absent. Fans were frustrated that there was no real explanation of who Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs were, but the filmmakers had to make choices. Explaining it all with flashbacks meant more actors and complicated storytelling. Doing it through long dialogue scenes would slow the movie down. In the end, they left only subtle hints and brief mentions. From a cinematic perspective, It was a practical decision. Number 8. Dumbledore's family past. In Deathly Hallows, Aberforth Dumbledore finally spat the truth at Harry. He told him about Ariana, how she couldn't control her magic, how their father was sent to Azkaban for attacking muggles who hurt her, how a duel between Albus, Aberforth and Gellert Grindelwald ended with Ariana dead on the floor. Aberforth's voice cracked with fury. Albus was free to become the greatest wizard of his age, and Ariana was buried. That confession made readers question everything they thought they knew about the wise, gentle headmaster. The films brushed past it quickly. Ariana's portrait hung in the Hog's head, a silent witness to the pain left unsaid. There was no room for Aberforth's broken voice, no time for Albus's guilt to weigh on Harry's choices. The filmmakers chose to keep the story streamlined. Too many details would have tangled the plot and slowed the march toward the final battle. By leaving most of Ariana's tragedy off-screen, they let Dumbledore remain the mysterious, flawed guide without forcing audiences to carry all of his ghosts. Number 9. Neville's parents' tragic fate. In the book Order of the Phoenix, Harry watches as Neville Longbottom gently tucks a candy wrapper into his mother's hand. Alice Longbottom doesn't recognize him. She only smiles vaguely. The scene in St. Mungo's hospital hits like a punch. Neville's parents, Frank and Alice, were tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. When Neville says quietly, "She likes giving me things," readers see the unbearable truth. This shy boy carries grief deeper than anyone imagined, fighting not for glory, but to honor what his parents can no longer do. The films mention this only in passing. There is no visit to St. Mungo's, no glimpse of Alice's empty eyes. Showing it on screen would have meant new sets, new actors, and a subplot branching away from Harry's own journey. It would have slowed the urgent pace of war brewing at Hogwarts. Instead, the filmmakers let a single line hint at the tragedy. Neville's determined face as he tells Harry about Bellatrix is all the audience gets. It was a careful choice that kept the story moving while leaving Neville's private heartbreak quietly smouldering off-screen. Number 10. Fleur and Bill's love story. Fleur Delacour was not always welcome at the Burrow. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Molly Weasley sniffed at her French manners and called her phlegm behind her back. Ginny rolled her eyes every time Fleur spoke. But after Bill Weasley was mauled by Fenrir Greyback, everything changed. Fleur stood in the ruined hospital wing and declared, "I am good-looking enough for both of us." She refused to leave him, scars and all. It was a moment that silenced Molly and won her respect with a single vow. The book gave space to this transformation. Readers watched the tension melt away as Fleur helped prepare Bill's wedding, and the Weasleys finally accepted her. For Harry, it was more than just family drama. It showed him what loyalty meant. Even in the middle of war, there was room for forgiveness and understanding. These scenes at the Burrow were warm, full of clinking dishes and raised voices, grounding the magic in something deeply human. The films had no room for it. Deathly Hallows. Part 1 only showed the wedding itself, bright and rushed before everything fell apart. Fleur and Bill's love story was reduced to a few seconds of holding hands. There was no argument in the kitchen, no teary truce with Molly. The filmmakers chose to move quickly toward the hunt for Horcruxes, leaving Fleur's defiance and Molly's surrender behind. It was a necessary sacrifice to keep the story lean, but it meant losing one of the series' quietest victories. Number 11, The Half-Blood Prince Mystery. Harry turned the battered old potions book in his hands, fingers tracing the careful notes in the margins. This book is property of the Half-Blood Prince, the inscription read, in spidery ink. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the mystery of who the prince really was haunted Harry for months. He argued with Hermione, who distrusted the book, while he perfected deadly spells like Sectum Sempra without knowing their cost. The story was slow, layered like a true whodunit, pulling readers deeper into Severus Snape's dark, brilliant mind long before the truth finally fell from his lips. "I am the half-blood prince." The film stripped that away. It kept the book, the helpful notes, but left out the careful unravelling. Gone were the debates with Hermione, her growing fear of the prince's magic, and Harry's stubborn refusal to listen. There was no lingering dread about using spells he didn't understand. For a 2-hour movie, it was the right choice. The film didn't have time to linger in slow, tense discoveries built from nothing but whispers and bookshelves. It needed room for Dumbledore's tragedy, Draco's mission, and the terrible promise Snape would make. Still, something was lost. In the book, the reveal of Snape's identity was more than a twist. It explained the complexity of a man Harry hated. It showed that even someone capable of murder and cruelty was once a brilliant student with a desperate need to belong. That heartbreak was hard to show in a film chasing a climax. So the filmmakers focused on Snape's final act of mercy. They trusted Alan Rickman's eyes to carry the story of a prince whose legacy lived in the pages of a ruined old book. Number 12. Percy Weasley, the prodigal son, returns. Percy Weasley stood in the great hall, soaked from the battle, tears mixing with blood on his face. For years he had turned his back on the family that loved him most. He had chosen the ministry over them, calling his father a traitor, refusing to come home, even when war darkened every corner of their lives. But in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling gives him a chance at redemption. Percy was shaking hands with Fred, and Fred was saying in a hushed voice, "No time for a big family reunion now, we've got to secure the corridors." It was awkward, raw, and heartbreakingly human. In that moment, Percy was no longer the arrogant ministry official. He was just a brother desperate to fix everything before it was too late. The books didn't hold back. They even gave us the cruelty of fate, killing Fred right after their reunion. Percy's scream over his brother's body was one of the most devastating images in the series. It wasn't just a battle, it was the price of pride, paid in blood. Readers felt every stab of guilt Percy carried as he refused to leave Fred's side, begging for forgiveness with every broken breath. The films didn't show this at all. Percy's feud with his family barely existed on screen, and so his return would have made no sense. Audiences who hadn't read the books wouldn't understand why he needed forgiveness in the first place. Adding his storyline would have meant building an entire emotional arc that simply wasn't there in previous movies. The filmmakers chose instead to keep the focus on Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the battle itself. A choice that, while painful for fans of the books, was fair, given the time they had to tell the story. Number 13. The Birth of Teddy Lupin. Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks fought side by side in the final battle, knowing they might never see their newborn son again. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling writes, "Tonks deserves someone young and whole. She doesn't care either. She loves me enough to want to marry me." Yet Lupin's fear wasn't just for himself. He was terrified of leaving his child fatherless. When Harry learns Tonks had a baby, it hits hard. A boy with Lupin's hair that changes colour like Tonks's, already an orphan before he can speak. The book lets us see this mirrored tragedy. Harry holds Teddy Lupin's fate in his thoughts, even as he faces Voldemort. It's a deliberate echo of his own childhood. Rowling doesn't shy from showing the cost of war. Harry is named Godfather, promising to look after the boy. "I'll try and make it better for him," Harry says. It's more than a line. It's a vow to break the cycle that took his own parents. Readers feel the crushing loss and the fragile hope of someone determined not to let history repeat itself. In the film, Teddy is reduced to a single mention. When Remus arrives at Shell Cottage and tells Harry, "Tonks is pregnant," the audience gets the barest outline. There's no birth, no promise, no mourning over an orphan in the chaos of battle's end. The filmmakers chose to spare time and complexity. Introducing Teddy properly would have required more scenes, new casting, and emotional beats that risked distracting from Harry's mission to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. For those unfamiliar with the books, it might have felt like an unrelated side story. Still, the omission left something hollow. The books showed the true price paid by those who fought. Teddy Lupin wasn't just a baby, he was a living consequence. Proof that even victory carried scars. The boy with colour-changing hair who would grow up without his parents reminded readers that heroes don't all get happy endings, and that the next generation inherits not only freedom, but grief. Number 14, Hermione and her parents. Hermione Granger stood in her parents' living room, wand trembling in her hand. She whispered, "Obliviate," knowing she was erasing every trace of herself from their minds. The book describes her desperation with heartbreaking clarity. She had erased herself completely from their lives. This moment in Deathly Hallows wasn't just strategy. It was an act of pure sacrifice. She was no longer their daughter, just a ghost they would never remember. The text gives us Hermione at her most human, choosing to protect her parents even if it meant losing them forever. The films, however, give us only a fleeting mention of this choice. Emma Watson plays the quiet weight of it in a single line, but there's no time to see her mother Helen or Father Wendell Granger as real people. No shot of their confused faces, no goodbye. Including that scene would have meant casting, shooting, and lingering in that heartbreak. It risked slowing the film's urgent pace, so the filmmakers made a brutal cut, trusting the audience would understand Hermione's loss with only a hint. If the movie had shown it, imagine the slow pan as Hermione packs her childhood photos away, knowing they'd forget the baby she once was. She would step into the rain outside, leaving the warm glow of their house behind. But Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 had a mission to stay sharp and fast. The hunt for Horcruxes could not pause for such an intimate tragedy. The choice was deliberate. They let us fill in the pain ourselves. Still, readers remember it. When Ron tries to console her later, he says, "You did what you had to do." But we know it wasn't that simple. She wasn't just fighting Voldemort, she was fighting her own heart, choosing the world over her family. It's one of Rowling's cruelest gifts to Hermione's story, that the brightest witch of her age would prove her courage not in battle, but in quiet obliteration. Number 15, Dumbledore's Gifts. Albus, Dumbledore's will is one of the richest veins of symbolism and narrative power in the entire Harry Potter series. Yet the films chose to treat it almost like a perfunctory plot device. In the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling devotes careful attention to each of the three objects he bequeaths to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The Deluminator, the Tales of Beedle the Bard, and the Golden Snitch are not simply clever wizarding curios. Each is a profound statement of Dumbledore's trust, hope, regret, and plan. But in the films, these layered meanings vanish in the rush of action. The camera brushes over them and the story moves on because to truly do them justice would have required an investment of screen time and emotional nuance that the movies were unwilling or unable to afford. Ron's Deluminator is the clearest example of this loss. In the book, Dumbledore leaves Ron the Deluminator in the hope that he will remember me when he uses it. That simple line resonates deeply when Ron flees from the group in a fit of anger and jealousy. Alone, cold, and bitterly regretting his decision, he uses the Deluminator and hears Hermione's voice. "Ron," she calls, faint and distant, but unmistakable. The device then draws a ball of light into Ron's heart, guiding him back through the darkness to his friends. This is not just a magical GPS, it is Dumbledore's. Understanding of Ron's weaknesses, his insecurity, his fear of being unwanted, and his belief in Ron's ability to overcome them. It is Dumbledore, even in death, showing Ron the way home. The film reduces all this to a single, barely explained moment, losing the thematic weight of trust and redemption. Hermione's inheritance is equally rich in meaning in the book. Dumbledore leaves her The Tales of Beedle the Bard, an old collection of wizarding fairy tales. At first, it seems an insult, Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, given a children's book, but Hermione alone has the patience and insight to truly study it. It is she who deciphers the symbol of the Deathly Hallows. It is she who reads the tale of the three brothers aloud, delivering the moral lesson of wisdom over power. Dumbledore knows she will resist the temptation of the Hallows, unlike Harry. As Rowling writes, Hermione's eyes were swimming with tears, recognizing the depth of what he's entrusted to her. In the film, the book is there only to deliver the story of the Hallows in a stylized animation sequence. Its role as a test of Hermione's character is almost invisible. Perhaps the most poignant of Dumbledore's gifts is the golden snitch he leaves to Harry. Inscribed with the words, "I open at the close," it becomes the riddle Harry must solve to face his own death. In the book, Harry wrestles with the snitch's mystery. He presses it to his lips, realizing it opens only when he is ready to die. Inside is the resurrection stone, one of the Hallows Dumbledore himself once coveted. Harry's acceptance of mortality, of sacrifice without reward, is the culmination of his hero's journey. He closed his eyes and turned the stone over in his hand 3 times, Rowling writes, conjuring his dead loved ones to guide him on the last walk to Voldemort. The film uses the snitch as a simple delivery mechanism with a single whispered clue. There is no careful exploration of what the close really means, no meditative acceptance of death, no private moment of Harry's moral victory. This choice in adaptation was not entirely unreasonable. The filmmakers had to balance pacing, spectacle, and audience engagement. Adding full explorations of the 3 gifts would have required scenes of introspection, symbolism, and quiet conversation, something blockbuster films rarely favor. The story would have slowed to let Harry puzzle over the snitch, to let Ron's fear and shame bloom fully before his return, to let Hermione read and debate old legends. Each of these would have demanded emotional depth from the actors, subtle direction, and time that was instead devoted to the hunt for Horcruxes and the final battle at Hogwarts. The films chose the direct conflict with Voldemort over these internal conflicts, streamlining the narrative to maintain energy and suspense. Yet in doing so, the movies lost a vital dimension of Dumbledore himself. The man who gave these gifts was not simply a strategist handing out tools, he was a penitent, a mentor haunted by his own youthful hunger for power. His choices for Harry, Ron, and Hermione were both practical and deeply personal. He knew Ron needed proof that he was essential, that even if he ran away, he could still return. He knew Hermione needed a reminder that truth often hides in the oldest, humblest stories, and that power is not the prize to seek. He knew Harry needed the courage to walk to his death. Each gift was a small confession of Dumbledore's own regrets, an apology for the manipulation he knew he had committed. As he says in Half-Blood Prince, "I make mistakes like the next man." In fact, being rather cleverer than most men, my mistakes tend to be correspondingly huger. Dumbledore's complexity fades in the films, where he often seems a distant puppet master or a kindly old wizard whose plans are always right. The will scene in the book is Rowling's way of showing the audience that Dumbledore cared about the trio as individuals, that he knew them better than they knew themselves, and that he trusted them to make the choices he himself had once failed to make. The gifts are more than relics, they are messages of love and responsibility. This layer of emotional truth is barely present in the films, which offer only the rough outline of Dumbledore's plan without revealing the humanity behind it. Number 16, the story of R.A.B. The story of Regulus Black, known only by the cryptic initials R.A.B., for much of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince and the Deathly Hallows is one of the series' most subtle tragedies, woven carefully into the pages but barely brushed against in the films. In the book it begins with a mystery, the fake Horcrux locket found in the basin in the cave, a note inside signed simply with those 3 letters. Harry, Ron, and Hermione puzzle over it, suspecting it might be the key to destroying Voldemort. The film adaptation, however, condenses this discovery to a mere mention, skipping the true identity and motivations of Regulus entirely. Yet in the book, this man's sacrifice is far from minor colour. It is a deeply human moment that reveals the monstrous cost of Voldemort's rise, even among his own followers. The choice to omit it on screen was no doubt deliberate, given the cluttered complexity of Deathly Hallows, but it leaves out an essential layer of moral nuance. Regulus Black was Sirius's younger brother, the good son who stayed loyal to the family's pure blood mania, joining the Death Eaters while Sirius rebelled. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius tells Harry dismissively, "He was younger than me, he got involved, went a bit further than I did." Yet that casual dismissal hides a world of pain. The family tapestry at 12 Grimmauld Place has his name burned into it after he turned against Voldemort. That visual detail in the film hints at a dark history, but it's never explained. In the books, Harry learns that Regulus didn't just lose faith in Voldemort's cause, he tried to destroy him from within, fully aware he would die for it. This is no simple story of a naive boy seduced by power. It's the story of someone who saw the abyss and chose to leap in to save others. When Kreacher finally tells Harry the truth in Deathly Hallows, the reader is shown how Regulus changed. Voldemort had ordered Kreacher to test the defences in the cave, forcing the elf to drink the potion in the basin and leaving him to die. But Kreacher survived because of the strange magic binding him to his master's orders. He could apparate home when ordered to return. Regulus demanded Kreacher tell him everything, and when he learned of Voldemort's true nature, using a Horcrux as an insurance against death, sacrificing even a loyal elf to protect it, Regulus's loyalties shattered. Master Regulus was very worried, Kreacher recalls. He told Kreacher to leave, told Kreacher to go, but Kreacher would not. Kreacher did not want to leave Master Regulus alone. It is an extraordinary scene, one that reveals the depth of the boy's terror and resolution. It is impossible to overstate the emotional power of the passage in which Regulus prepares to die. He knows the price. Someone must drink the potion to retrieve the locket. Someone must take Voldemort's trap on themselves. In the book, Kreacher sobs as he remembers it, telling Harry, "Master Regulus took from his pocket a locket like the one in the cave, and he told Kreacher to take it, and when the basin was empty to switch them." Regulus drank the potion himself, screaming in agony. He collapsed on the shore, dragged into the dark water by the Inferi, as Kreacher obeyed his final command to return home. This is the cost of Voldemort's cruelty, a boy corrupted, awakening too late, who can only redeem himself by dying horribly to destroy one fragment of evil. The film adaptation of Deathly Hallows does mention the fake Horcrux note signed R.A.B., but never shows Regulus or explains his plan. This is not laziness, it is a deliberate omission for pacing. By the time Harry and friends are destroying Horcruxes in the last film, the narrative is overloaded with exposition about the Elder Wand, the Deathly Hallows themselves, the hunt for Horcruxes, Snape's memories, Dumbledore's past. To add an entire investigation into who R.A.B. was and why he died would have required flashbacks, dialogue with Kreacher, and a shift in tone. It would have slowed the tense forward momentum of the story. In the language of cinema, it had to be cut. But that omission carries a price. Without Regulus's story, the film version of the Horcrux hunt lacks its most human note of hope from within the enemy camp. It is in the book that we learn evil is not monolithic. Even in the Black family, so fiercely proud of its blood purity, there was someone who realized Voldemort was willing to kill anyone, wizard or elf alike. The irony is sharp. Sirius, who rejected his family entirely, never learns that his despised younger brother chose to die trying to stop Voldemort. "My parents were horrible people," Sirius says, "but they're dead now." And yet Regulus found a way to make amends, even if no one would ever know. It is a secret act of redemption that casts a shadow over the simplistic view of good and evil. Even Kreacher, the foul-mouthed, bigoted house elf, becomes a vessel of that transformation. In Deathly Hallows, Harry treats him with compassion, using his real name, and gains his loyalty. Creature's sudden improvement is explained directly by his bond with Regulus's memory. He isn't just obeying orders now, he is honouring the last true master he respected. When he shuffles to the kitchen, muttering about Master Regulus's orders, the reader sees the tragedy of a servant who outlived his beloved master and never truly recovered. The movie glosses over this transformation, making Creature's loyalties seem abrupt and unearned. Number 17, Dumbledore's Funeral. Albus Dumbledore's funeral in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is not simply an event. It is a solemn meditation on loss, legacy, and the irrevocable shift from childhood to adult responsibility. In the book, J.K. Rowling crafts a rich, sorrowful chapter in which the entire magical world seems to pause to pay tribute to a fallen giant. The funeral takes place by the lake at Hogwarts, where white marble tomb is erected, shining like hope against the encroaching darkness of Voldemort's war. Harry watches as people from every corner of the magical world gather in hushed sorrow, including centaurs who shoot arrows in salute and merfolk who sing their mourning songs beneath the lake's rippling surface. This moment of universal respect, layered with magical imagery, is essential in the novel because it shows how even in grief, the wizarding world finds a kind of unity, a brief, shared moment of mourning before the final battle. Yet the film adaptation chose to exclude this entire funeral scene, leaving viewers instead with Dumbledore's lifeless body lying on the grounds beneath the astronomy tower and the emotional tableau of students raising their wands in tribute, their light pushing back the dark mark above the castle. While striking in its own right, this cinematic choice reshapes the emotional pacing of the finale. The film moves quickly from Snape's murder of Dumbledore to Harry's grief-stricken resolve to hunt Horcruxes, eliminating the quiet, meditative closure that the owl funeral provides in the book. One can see why the filmmakers made this decision. Pacing is a relentless master, and a long funeral sequence might have disrupted the charged momentum of the climax. Audiences in cinemas expect the energy of an ending to sustain them to the credits, and this raw, more visceral tribute offered that while maintaining the urgency of the looming war. The absence of the funeral scene also means the loss of the communal aspect of mourning. In the book, Rowling makes clear that Dumbledore's influence was so vast that even creatures who rarely deal with humans felt compelled to honor him. She writes, Harry saw the centaurs emerge from the trees behind Hagrid's hut, arrows raised in tribute. From the lake came the merpeople, singing in their strange, eerie voices. It is not just Hogwarts grieving, it is the entire magical world. This scene underscores Dumbledore's role as a bridge between factions that are often in conflict or mistrustful of one another. His death, therefore, is not merely the loss of a headmaster or mentor, but the loss of a unifying force for all magical beings, a symbolic fracture in the fragile peace that had held despite Voldemort's rise. For Harry, this communal funeral also represents the final nail in the coffin of his childhood. Up to this point, even with Cedric Diggory's death and Sirius's fall through the veil, there remained something protective about Dumbledore's presence, a promise that there was still one person in the world who had a plan and who might keep Harry safe. At the funeral, Harry realizes this shield is truly gone. The book says, Harry felt, as he had felt about Sirius, that he would have given anything to bring Dumbledore back. He knew that he would have to face Voldemort alone. This internal revelation is a crucial psychological turning point for Harry, marking his transition from student to soldier, from child to leader of a doomed resistance. By excluding the funeral, the film sacrifices this deep exploration of Harry's emotional landscape. Instead, the movie ends on the astronomy tower with Harry stating flatly that he's not returning to Hogwarts and will hunt Horcruxes. While efficient for storytelling, it shortchanges the complexity of Harry's grief. The book's funeral lets Harry feel the enormity of his loss, forcing readers to sit with him in that moment of devastation. It's not just plot, it's character development through shared sorrow and the rituals of saying goodbye. Consider, too, the relationships Dumbledore built with characters who seem absent in the film's final tribute. The book carefully catalogues those who attend, the Weasleys mourning as a family, Madame Maxime towering in black silk, Scrimgeour representing the Ministry despite its fraying relationship with Hogwarts, and even Grawp, Hagrid's half-brother, solemn and childlike in his confusion. These details emphasize that Dumbledore was not just Harry's mentor, but a statesman of sorts in the magical world, a figure who commanded respect across nations, species, and political divides. By leaving this out, the film necessarily narrows Dumbledore's legacy to a purely Hogwarts-focused sphere, rather than showing the breadth of his influence. There's also the matter of tone. The book's funeral is not simply sad, but almost sacred. Rowling gives it an elegiac grace, balancing the horror of Dumbledore's death with the beauty of collective remembrance. The mermaids were singing in a strange language Harry did not understand. It sounded mournful and eerie. This line alone conjures a haunting image of magic as something simultaneously wondrous and solemn. The funeral scene's purpose is not to advance the plot in any traditional sense, but to let readers dwell in the emotional consequences of the death. It is a literary pause that forces recognition of loss as meaningful and transformative. For the filmmakers, such a pause may have felt risky. The cinematic language of a blockbuster does not easily accommodate long, meditative sequences about grief, particularly in the final minutes of an action-heavy film. Their choice to exclude it was thus pragmatic, avoiding the risk of boring or deflating the audience, just as they needed to feel galvanized for the final installment. Indeed, they substituted the funeral with the moment in which all present raise their wands to banish the dark mark, a visually stirring scene that delivers immediate catharsis and collective defiance without lingering on sorrow. Number 18. The visit to the Lovegoods' house. Harry, Ron, and Hermione's perilous winter journey in the Deathly Hallows led them, cold and desperate, to the eccentric home of Xenophilius Lovegood, a moment the book spends rich, tense pages on, but the film barely sketches. The book paints the Lovegood house as a vertical, narrow tower of stone, full of Luna's drawings and odd, spinning magical devices where everything seems just a little off-kilter. It's not merely a backdrop for exposition, but a trap, slowly closing in, with the trio realizing too late that their only supposed ally has turned on them. Rowling writes, "There was a grinding noise and a lurch beneath their feet. The house had rotated on the spot, and the door had vanished." This chilling shift transforms the meeting from an informative visit into a life-threatening ambush, something the film trims to a brief exchange with Xenophilius explaining the Deathly Hallows myth before the scene ends with barely a tremor of danger. The novel uses the Lovegood visit to explore the complicated morality of a man who betrays children to save his daughter. Xenophilius is not a cardboard villain. Rowling's text reveals his anguish as he tries to rationalize his betrayal. "I have to save Luna," he croaks in desperation. He is a desperate father, showing that in wartime, even good people commit terrible acts for family. This is not easy content for a blockbuster to adapt without slowing the pace or muddying the moral lines it wants viewers to rally behind. The film, knowing its time constraints, keeps only the Deathly Hallows tale itself, which is gorgeously animated but strips away the raw human drama of Xenophilius's betrayal. By doing so, it sacrifices complexity for clarity, sparing viewers the messy truth that good people can still do wrong. In the book, the trio is trapped inside the house after Xenophilius summons the Death Eaters. Harry, Ron, and Hermione have to scramble to survive, destroying the house in the process. Rowling describes, "The printing press toppled over with a crash, sending papers everywhere. The wall cracked as Hermione's spell slammed into it." The chaos is physical and frightening, showing the cost of betrayal. the Lovegood home is reduced to wreckage, a metaphor for Xenophilius's moral collapse. By omitting this in the film, the adaptation avoids depicting the trio's violent, destructive escape, a costly sequence that would have required time, effects, and a tonal shift from the Hallows legend's quiet, eerie storytelling to explosive confrontation. This omission also changes the portrayal of Hermione Granger. In the book, she is the strategist who keeps her head, realizing that Xenophilius has betrayed them and devising the magical means of escape. She isn't just a listener to a story, but a fighter navigating danger. Rowling shows her relentless pragmatism, noting, Hermione was already at the door, wand ready. Without this scene, the film loses an example of her brilliance under pressure. While the film rightly wants to maintain momentum toward the climax, it sacrifices these small, character-defining moments that make Hermione not just clever, but a survivor. Ron Weasley, too, has a crucial moment in the book's Lovegood scene. He is deeply suspicious of Xenophilius from the start, providing a rare instance of Ron's intuition outpacing Harry's. Rowling writes, Ron was staring at Xenophilius, his face hard. It is one of those moments when Ron isn't comic relief or second fiddle, but the wary friend seeing danger before the others. The film, pressed for time, turns the scene into a linear transfer of information about the Hallows without giving Ron the chance to be the cautious protector. This simplification flattens Ron's role in the story's darker turns. Harry's reaction to the betrayal is also richer in the book. Rowling shows Harry's dawning horror and bitterness. He felt a savage anger rise up in him. He understands that Xenophilius's love for Luna mirrors his own love for friends, making the betrayal more personal and painful. It's an example of Harry's moral education during the war, learning that love itself can drive people to desperate, even terrible acts. In cutting the escape and betrayal, the film loses this exploration of Harry's own potential for understanding and forgiveness, which adds nuance to his character's path toward confronting Voldemort. The Lovegood home itself is a character in the book. It is full of magical oddities and Luna's drawings of creatures like the crumple-horned Snorkack, which signal Luna's childlike wonder, but also her isolation. Rowling notes, portraits of Luna with her mother covered the walls, all moving, all smiling. This is more than set dressing. It shows the family's bond, making Xenophilius's betrayal feel tragic rather than purely treacherous. The film's brief visit cannot accommodate this layered atmosphere. Instead, it reduces the home to a single room where the Hallows story is told, severing the sense of lived-in strangeness that makes the betrayal hurt. In the book, the tension ratchets up gradually. Xenophilius's growing nervousness is palpable. He kept glancing toward the window. The trio's dawning suspicion adds dread to every line. The reader knows something is wrong long before the trap closes. This Hitchcockian suspense is hard to replicate in a limited film scene without derailing the movie's forward momentum. The adaptation chooses to remove the slow burn betrayal entirely, turning the Lovegood visit into a simple delivery of exposition rather than a horror sequence in miniature. The betrayal scene also serves a thematic purpose in the book, showing the spread of Voldemort's terror. Xenophilius is not an enemy agent but a man crushed by fear. His desperate choice exposes how even the seemingly gentle wizarding world is under siege. Rowling writes, "I took my Luna because of what I've been writing." This line crystallizes the cost of resistance and the suffocating grip of Voldemort's regime. The film mentions Luna's capture, but doesn't let the audience feel the same raw fear or see the full impact of this totalitarian state on everyday people. The explosive escape from the Lovegood house in the book is also one of the rare moments when the trio's quest for Horcruxes collides with the Hallows subplot in an immediate, physical way. Xenophilius calls the Death Eaters who hope to capture Harry and deliver him to Voldemort in exchange for Luna. It's a direct link between the abstract search for magical artifacts and the brutal reality of being hunted. Rowling refuses to let these narrative threads remain purely theoretical. The film, in simplifying the scene, preserves clarity but loses the feeling of these dangers bleeding into one another in unpredictable, violent ways. The book also uses the scene to show how fragile trust is in wartime. Harry and friends arrive seeking knowledge but find betrayal. Xenophilius wants to help but is too afraid. It is a moment that says even allies might turn on you when threatened. Rowling makes readers grapple with this moral uncertainty. He did it for Luna. He didn't want to, but he did. The film avoids this moral messiness in favor of a streamlined confrontation with Voldemort and the Deathly Hallows concept, which is neater but less honest. There's also a thematic echo in the book between Xenophilius's betrayal and Dumbledore's own secretiveness. Both men hide information for what they think are good reasons, yet both cause Harry pain. Xenophilius withholds the truth about his plan to summon the Death Eaters, just as Dumbledore withholds the truth about the Hallows and the Elder Wand. The scene in the book is a microcosm of the story's central question: can you trust even those who claim to love you? The film skips this thematic resonance by making the Lovegood visit only about the legend, not the moral test it is in the book. For Luna herself, this omission reduces her role to a background prisoner in Malfoy Manor later. In the book, the Lovegood scene foreshadows her fate in a more personal, emotional way. We see the cost to her father, the urgency to rescue her, and the danger she faces. Rowling's text says, "They took Luna, I've got to get her back." The film still has Luna in captivity, but lacks the gut punch of seeing her father's house turned into a battlefield because of his choice to trade Harry's life for hers. Without this, Luna's plight becomes just another plot point rather than a tragedy rooted in family love. The Lovegood betrayal is also important for the trio's internal tensions. After narrowly escaping, they argue over what to do next, questioning whom they can trust. Rowling writes, "They glared at each other, breathing hard, ash in their hair." This messy, traumatized reaction reminds readers that they are not invincible heroes, but teenagers cracking under relentless pressure. The film, which cuts this scene, moves them swiftly on to the next step of their quest, keeping them focused and determined, but less vulnerable and real. Ultimately, the filmmakers had sound reasons for cutting or shortening the Lovegood betrayal. A full depiction would have been its own act within the film's structure, slowing the pace and risking audience confusion about the already dense lore of Hallows versus Horcruxes. Yet the book's version remains powerful precisely because it forces readers to sit with discomfort. It insists that in war there are no easy lines between good and evil, that love can justify betrayal, that fear can corrupt even the well-meaning. By leaving it out, the film preserved tempo but lost a crucial, painful lesson about the price of survival in Voldemort's world. Number 19, Harry and Cho Chang's relationship. Harry's 5th year at Hogwarts is often remembered for its gloom and anger, but the novel Order of the Phoenix also quietly carves out a painful, deeply human subplot in his romance with Cho Chang. Rowling gives us more than the brief, cinematic, snow-kissed kiss viewers saw on screen. Instead, she crafts a detailed portrait of two teenagers fumbling through grief, attraction, and hurt pride. In the book, Harry's relationship with Cho is not just a single, tender moment in the Room of Requirement. It is a stumbling path littered with missteps, showing Harry as a flawed, painfully awkward 15-year-old whose legendary destiny offers no guidance in the matters of the heart. It is in these pages that readers see a hero who forgets the right words when it matters most, who feels jealous and misunderstood, who can't comfort the girl mourning his dead rival. This, Rowling insists, is as much part of Harry's journey as fighting Death Eaters. The book gives us Harry's first real date in Hogsmeade, a cringeworthy masterclass in teenage discomfort. Rowling does not spare her protagonist the embarrassment. Cho's hand was trembling in his, the text describes as they set out, a detail that speaks volumes about how fragile both of them are. They are two traumatized kids trying to behave like carefree sweethearts on Valentine's Day, but the ghost of Cedric Diggory is between them at every step. At Madame Puddifoot's tea shop, Rowling paints a scene thick with sugary core and boiling tension. The lace and cherubs might as well be mocking them. Harry, clueless and miserable, watches Cho crying over her dead boyfriend, while also bristling with anger when she suggests he wants to meet Hermione Granger instead. The novel refuses to make this easy. Readers see every misfired word, every wince and hesitation, as Harry's well-meaning but blunt honesty clashes with Cho's vulnerable grief. It's telling that the film adaptation cuts all of this in favor of one silent, pretty kiss. That choice is not an accident, but a decision made in respect for cinematic pacing and tone. The filmmakers understood that Harry's romantic failures, while authentic and revealing on the page, would risk pulling focus from the battle lines being drawn against Voldemort. In a 2-hour movie stuffed with prophecy, betrayal, the rise of the Inquisitorial Squad and Dumbledore's army, there was no space for an extended study of teenage heartbreak. The scene they chose instead, Harry and Cho kissing under the mistletoe in the Room of Requirement, distills all the confusion and longing into one quiet moment, offering viewers a brief respite before the story plunges back into the war. But the book's more nuanced version does something else entirely. It explores Harry's anger at being famous for surviving when Cedric did not, and how that affects his fragile bond with Cho. Rowling allows Harry to feel justified yet cruel when he won't lie to make Cho feel better. When Cho cries at his honesty, Harry simply stares, wishing he could sink into the floor and vanish. This is the Harry Potter who knows how to face a Hungarian horntail, but not a girl's tears. It's raw and uncomfortable, but that is precisely why it matters. It shows readers that being the chosen one offers no immunity from being a clumsy, self-centered teenage boy. Cho herself is no simpler figure in the novel than Harry is. She's the grieving girlfriend of a murdered boy, drawn to Harry for reasons even she can't explain. Is it comfort? Shared guilt? Rowling never resolves it neatly. Cho's jealousy of Hermione Granger is especially telling. When Harry explains he's meeting Hermione as a friend, Cho explodes in frustration. In the book, Harry fumes inwardly at the unfairness. Hermione was only helping him prepare for their defense against the dark arts group. But Rowling refuses to paint Cho as simply irrational. She is in pain, defensive about how quickly people expect her to move on from Cedric. The tension between them feels unbearably real because both of them have reasons for their hurt. One of the most memorable book scenes is their argument in the corridor after the disastrous date. Cho cries that Harry has no feelings at all, a line that cuts him to the bone because he's so sure he's right and so sure she's wrong. Rowling writes Harry's inner monologue with ruthless honesty, showing him caught between pity and fury. He doesn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse, so he says nothing at all. Readers watch as two genuinely good broken people drive each other away simply because they don't know how to carry their grief without dropping it on each other's feet. The book lets it all play out slowly, so the pain is earned. By contrast, the film reduces this entire relationship to a single conflict. Cho is revealed as the one who betrayed Dumbledore's army, albeit under verite serum. The betrayal scene is quick, clear, and narratively useful. It gives Harry a concrete reason to sever ties and puts the plot back on track. But in the book, Cho's betrayal doesn't even happen. Her friend Marietta does. Cho defends her friend's actions out of loyalty, creating an entirely different moral mess. Rowling's version doesn't offer Harry a clean break or clear moral high ground. It is more painful because it is more confusing. Cho and Harry simply stop talking, their relationship dying from neglect and hurt feelings. The choice to simplify their relationship on screen was not merely for time, but for clarity. Films need emotional through lines that don't get tangled in too many subplots. The primary arc of Order of the Phoenix is Harry's rage and isolation, his resistance against the Ministry's lies, and the growth of Dumbledore's army. His teenage romance, however true to life, would muddy those themes on film. The kiss in the Room of Requirement gives the audience what it needs to know. Harry is lonely, he wants closeness, but his life is too dangerous for real love right now. It is symbolic more than literal, saving precious run time for the war that is coming. Still, many readers love the book version, precisely because it refuses to be neat. It is as much about Cedric as about Harry and Cho. Cedric's death haunts every moment they spend together. Harry tries not to mention it, Cho can't stop thinking about it, and neither can figure out how to grieve side by side. The novel's dialogue is full of broken sentences and accidental cruelties. In one moment, Cho says miserably, "I thought you'd understand," and Harry realizes too late that he doesn't. These small tragedies make their failure inevitable. The film's one kiss cannot hold all that sorrow, so it wisely doesn't try. One of Rowling's goals with this subplot was to break the heroic myth of Harry Potter. Readers get an unfiltered look at how unprepared he is for love. He doesn't know how to lie gently. He doesn't know how to reassure someone without getting angry himself. Rowling writes him, for once, not as a leader or soldier, but as a boy who wants to be liked and keeps tripping over his own words. This flaw is not punished with death or prophecy, but with heartbreak, a consequence just as formative. When fans remember Cho Chang in the books, they often think of that tearful, silent Hogsmeade date, and for good reason. It is one of the most awkward scenes in the series, made worse by Harry's obliviousness and Cho's grief-stricken hope. The film's choice to skip it was merciful for viewers who wanted action, but it leaves out a vital note of Harry's adolescence. That date is not a diversion in the book, but a window into how war distorts everything, even a teenager's first real romance. Even the fallout from their breakup is messier in the novel. Harry sulks. Cho tries to talk to him again. They misunderstand each other. There's no dramatic confrontation, just slow erosion. Rowling writes, "They were not talking much anymore," a heartbreakingly ordinary phrase that captures the real way young relationships die. The filmmakers knew such quiet disintegration would vanish on screen. They needed something punchier, simpler, a clean betrayal, a single confrontation, and then the story could move on. What the film's choice ultimately proves is that storytelling media have different strengths. Books can show us months of gradual heartbreak in internal monologues and awkward conversations. Films need to make choices that keep the audience engaged and the story clear. The Room of Requirement kiss is the filmmaker's best compromise, a single moment of tenderness that acknowledges Harry's longing for normalcy before snatching it away in betrayal. It may be streamlined, but it honors the spirit of the book's complexity without drowning in it. And so, the film's decision to skip Harry and Cho's full arc is not lazy adaptation, but careful prioritization. Voldemort's return, Umbridge's rise, Sirius's death, these are the story's pillars. Harry's failed romance, while beautifully written, is a thematic grace note about how trauma infects even the most ordinary parts of life. The book has time to play that melody in full. The film must choose its songs carefully. The simplification is not an insult to readers, but an admission that cinema cannot hold every thread. Readers who love Order of the Phoenix often feel a pang at losing these scenes in the adaptation. The fight in Madame Puddifoot's, Cho's jealousy over Hermione, Harry's rage at being accused of coldness, these are the details that make them feel like real teenagers rather than symbols. Rowling's decision to put Harry through this heartbreak is not wasted subplot but essential character work. It is the story of a boy learning that not all battles are fought with wands. Some are lost over tea in a cramped little shop, while cherubs sprinkle fake snow. That is why even the simplest line in the book can hurt so much. They were not talking much anymore. It is not an epic duel or a prophecy fulfilled, but it is the death of hope. The film chose not to show it, perhaps out of mercy for its hero, but readers know it happened. and in knowing they see Harry not just as a hero, but as a boy who once wanted to hold someone's trembling hand and couldn't keep it. Number 20. Departure from the Dursleys' home. The final meeting between Harry Potter and the Dursleys in the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows carries a weight that cannot be ignored, even though the film adaptation chose to omit it entirely. On the page, this departure is more than just a hurried escape. It is an unexpected moment of humanity that allows the characters to show depth beyond the roles they had occupied for 6 long books. When the Order of the Phoenix comes to evacuate Harry from Privet Drive, the Dursleys are forced to confront the reality that their nephew is in mortal danger, and they themselves must flee for their lives because of him. This confrontation strips away years of cruel jokes and disdainful remarks. It lays bare something unspoken, that in the end, despite the hatred and fear, they shared a home, and something about that fact lingers with them, whether they admit it or not. The novel gives Dudley Dursley in particular an almost redemptive moment, allowing him to step out from the cartoonish role of the bullying cousin and reveal the conflicted young man he has become. For years, he called Harry a freak and treated him with undisguised contempt. But the war against Voldemort is no longer an abstract thing, and the threat is at their very door. In the book, Dudley surprises everyone by refusing to leave without acknowledging Harry. "I don't think you're a waste of space," Dudley says, simple words that resonate with all the more force for their clumsiness. It is a moment where the reader is forced to confront the humanity even in a character designed to be hated, and Harry, equally stunned, extends his hand in farewell. J.K. Rowling allows them both a fragile kind of closure, one built on awkward honesty. The film adaptation of Deathly Hallows Part 1 did not include this scene, opting instead for an urgent, foreboding sequence in which Harry simply watches the Dursleys pack their car and leave without a word. This decision, while disappointing to some readers, was made to preserve the tone the filmmakers wanted. The mood at the beginning of the movie is designed to be one of impending doom. The entire wizarding world is falling into Voldemort's grip. Danger is no longer coming, it is here. Lingering on a quiet reconciliation would have slowed the momentum and dulled the sharp edge of anxiety they wanted to maintain in the viewer. It is impossible to deny that the book's version of the Dursleys' exit is quiet but transformative in its own way. The Dursleys had spent years denying Harry even the most basic kindness. They starved him, locked him in a cupboard, and treated him like a dangerous animal rather than family. That Dudley could see past this, even slightly, shows growth. Petunia and Vernon Dursley remain less repentant, but even they seem more vulnerable as they prepare to go into hiding. Petunia's silence in the book is telling. She opens her mouth as if to say something meaningful, but fails to. Rowling gives us that glimpse of hesitation, suggesting that there is something she wants to acknowledge but is too bound by pride or fear to voice. Rowling's choice to write the Dursleys in this way is not an attempt to redeem them fully. She doesn't excuse the abuse or rewrite history. Instead, she allows for the possibility that people are rarely all one thing. Dudley's grudging respect for Harry does not erase the bullying of childhood. Instead, it shows that people can change in small, flawed ways. This is a realism that deepens the emotional fabric of the story. The war against Voldemort is a war of ideologies, of blood purity and hatred, but also a war that exposes the small cruelties and failures of ordinary people. The Dursleys, in their final scene in the book, become a subtle testament to this complexity. On the screen, however, that nuance was judged too costly to the pacing and emotional tone. David Yates and Steve Kloves, the director and screenwriter respectively, had to make choices about what moments served the core story they wanted to tell. For the films, particularly the last two installments, the threat of Voldemort had to feel omnipresent. There is little room for reflective humanity when death can strike at any moment. The Order's plan to move Harry is presented in the film as a military operation on the brink of catastrophe. The urgency is palpable. No time for heartfelt exchanges with Muggle relatives who can never truly understand the stakes. It's a brutal, efficient choice, one that aligns with cinema's need to show rather than tell. Still, for readers, the omission of that final exchange between Harry and Dudley leaves a wound. Harry's childhood in Privet Drive was defined by loneliness and abuse. The scene in the book allows Harry to leave that house not in bitterness, but with a complicated, reluctant understanding. Harry himself is surprised by Dudley's words, and there is no melodramatic embrace. Just an honest admission that Harry was never a waste of space. It is the closest thing to an apology Harry will ever get from the boy who once punched him for fun. It is a testament to Harry's own capacity to forgive, to see that small, painful spark of good in someone who had given him every reason to hate. Even Vernon and Petunia, while they never say the words outright, are shown in the book to be afraid not only of Voldemort, but of what they are leaving behind. Petunia's almost spoken words carry the memory of a sister lost to magic and war. Rowling doesn't let them off the hook, but she shows us that their cruelty had its roots in fear and jealousy. These are not excuses, but they are explanations. It is a subtle difference, one that deepens the emotional stakes of Harry's departure from the only non-magical home he ever knew. The films decided that this complexity was expendable. But the filmmakers were not wrong to cut it. In the language of film, that scene would have disrupted the atmosphere of dread they were crafting. A tender, if awkward, farewell would have let the audience exhale too soon. The film needed the tension to be unrelenting. When Harry watches the Dursleys drive away silently in the movie, it becomes a moment not of closure but of abandonment. The viewer is forced to feel that the last tie to the ordinary world has been severed. The Dursleys don't say goodbye, they flee, and Harry is left to face the terror alone, underscoring his isolation in a way that serves the cinematic tone. Number 21, the House Elves' Revolt at Hogwarts. In the thick, suffocating chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, when spells turned ancient walls to rubble and the cries of the wounded echoed through the great hall, there is a moment in the book that flickers like a small, defiant candle, the house elves charging out of the kitchens, knives aloft, led by the fierce and loyal creature. This is no small footnote in the tapestry of J.K. Rowling's climax. It is a moment of raw collective rebellion by a species long oppressed, rising up to defend the very castle that once used them as unpaid servants. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows it says plainly, "And then there were the house elves of Hogwarts, who had come out of the kitchens armed with knives and cleavers, and whose tiny voices were rising in shrieks of fury and whooped encouragement for Creature." This image is not just for spectacle, it is a powerful statement about dignity, loyalty, and the universal stand against Voldemort's tyranny. Yet in the cinematic translation of this sprawling battle, the house elves vanish entirely, as though they had melted back into the shadows of the castle they served. The filmmakers chose not to show Creature's rallying cry, nor the furious tide of tiny bodies wielding kitchen knives like swords. Instead, the focus in the film rests tightly on Harry, Voldemort, and the main ensemble of human characters battling on the ramparts. There is a practical reason for this. A sequence involving dozens of CGI elves charging the Death Eaters would have demanded significant resources, and for a franchise already heavy with special effects, the addition of this scene threatened to bloat an already crowded final act. But beyond technical demands, there was a narrative consideration that loomed even larger, maintaining the emotional clarity of the final duel between Harry and Voldemort. The book's inclusion of the Elves' Rebellion is more than just a dramatic flourish. It is the culmination of Hermione's tireless, often mocked crusade for elf rights through S.P.E.W. It is justice, delayed but delivered, as the elves choose to defend their home and the wizards who finally treated them with some measure of respect. Creature, once an emblem of sneering, resentful servitude, finds a measure of redemption. His transformation is significant. Fight! Fight for my master, defender of house elves. Fight the Dark Lord in the name of brave Regulus. Fight! He bellows these words, invoking Regulus Black, the S.P.E.W. man who showed him the first kindness he ever truly remembered. This is the completion of Kreacher's arc, a slave who finds purpose and agency, who makes a choice to stand against the very ideology that killed his master. Filming this would have demanded more than visual effects. It would have required developing Kreacher as a character across the films, rather than relegating him to a single grim appearance in Order of the Phoenix and a short scene in Deathly Hallows Part 1. The films streamlined Kreacher's story, and in doing so they quietly stripped him of the depth that would have made his leadership in the battle meaningful. To see Kreacher lead an army of house elves without this foundation would have felt hollow, confusing, and perhaps even comical in the film's grim, violent tone. The movies prioritized emotional economy, ensuring the audience's focus stayed locked on the central tragedy, the boy who lived, walking willingly to die. Moreover, the elf rebellion in the book represents a thematic climax for Rowling's broader exploration of magical society's class divisions. For 7 books, the wizarding world is shown as rife with prejudice, not just toward Muggleborns, but also toward non-human beings like goblins, centaurs, and elves. The house elves charging from the kitchens is a literal revolt of the underclass, a revolution sparked not by their master's orders, but by their own moral choice. It is a beautiful, if brief, vision of unity in the face of fascism. The filmmakers knew that weaving this thread convincingly into the film would have meant explaining the complexities of elf enslavement, S.P.E.W., Kreacher's loyalty, and Hermione's activism, all without slowing the pace of a climactic battle that had to resolve the core story of Harry and Voldemort. And so they chose to leave it out. In a medium where time is always at a premium, something had to go. The battle itself in the films is already simplified compared to the novel, with fewer named characters getting their moments, and even the deaths of Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks happening off-screen. The final duel is stylized and cinematic, but pared down with all subplots trimmed away to let the camera linger on the tense, personal hatred between Harry and Voldemort. In this context, a scene of Kreacher screaming war cries while kitchen knives flash in the torchlight would have felt like a tonal swerve, at odds with the stark, operatic showdown the filmmakers were building. It is worth remembering that the house elves in the films are largely silent background figures. Aside from Dobby, whose death is given its due, and Kreacher's brief, apologetic transformation in Deathly Hallows Part 1, there is no sustained exploration of their condition. S.P.E.W. is cut entirely. The reality of their unpaid, coerced labor is never truly confronted on screen. Without this groundwork, their sudden rebellion would lack the emotional charge it carries in the book. The audience might ask, why do they care? Why would these creatures risk everything for Hogwarts? The answer, because it is their home too, because even the most downtrodden deserve to choose their side. In the fight against evil relies on a history the films chose not to tell, and in that choice lies something sad but understandable. Film demands focus, and the screenwriters and director David Yates chose to center their final chapter on the tragedy and triumph of Harry's journey. The Battle of Hogwarts on film is a war movie's fever dream, with screaming children, collapsing staircases, and Voldemort's shrieking laugh as he strides through the carnage. It is intense, relentless, and personal. Adding a subplot about house elves achieving class solidarity might have been thematically powerful, but narratively distracting or worse, unintentionally comic, if not handled with exquisite care. But the book gives us that moment. It gives us the shrill defiance of the smallest voices rising in fury. It gives us Kreacher's redemption and the promise that even those forced into servitude can find freedom in choice. It is a powerful act of world-building and moral imagination that expands the scope of the battle beyond Harry's personal vendetta against Voldemort to a struggle for the soul of wizarding society itself. The line, whose tiny voices were rising in shrieks of fury, is as important as any killing curse because it signals that Voldemort's defeat is not just Harry's victory, but the victory of everyone he sought to dominate. Even in the book, the elf attack is not a major plot point in the sense of changing the battle's outcome. Voldemort is not slain by an elf's knife. The elves do not save the day in any grand cinematic sense, but they stand, they fight. And in that act they declare themselves part of the wizarding world's resistance. It is an act of solidarity that says as much about the moral stakes of the battle as Harry's sacrifice does. The filmmaker's decision to omit it may be justified in terms of pacing and tone, but it is a loss, too, a quieter, subtler loss that trims away one of the story's most radical notes. Consider, too, the potential unintended effects if the scene were badly done. The spectacle of siege elves in chef hats, swinging cleavers at masked Death Eaters, could have come off as slapstick, undermining the severity of a battle where beloved characters are dying. The tone in the book balances the horror and the hope with remarkable control, but film is a medium where such balance is treacherous. One misjudged shot can turn the sublime into the ridiculous. The filmmakers likely feared this, and reasonably so. They had to weigh the risk of distracting the audience or even trivializing the final confrontation. And there is the problem of Creature himself. His book counterpart is a creature of remarkable complexity. A bigot molded by generations of black family cruelty, yet capable of loyalty, love, and change. In the films, Creature is an afterthought, given a single note of begrudging compliance after Harry shows him kindness. Without the full arc, his leading the charge would have felt unearned. There is no time for the audience to see him mourn Regulus, no time to see his loyalty shift, no moment to grasp why he screams, "Fight for my master, defender of House Elves." It is an irony that the films, in cutting this scene, also cut the groundwork that would have made it essential. Ultimately, the decision to omit the House Elves from the Battle of Hogwarts reflects the brutal arithmetic of adaptation. In a novel, there is room for layers, for subplots that illuminate the world's moral texture. In a film meant for a global audience with a limited runtime, there is a demand for simplicity and narrative propulsion. The elves' revolt is a victim of that demand, not because it lacks meaning, but because its meaning is too rich, too nuanced, too tangled with the story's deeper themes to be easily conveyed in a handful of minutes of screen time. Yet for those who love the books, the image of a Creature leading his kin with butcher knives raised is indelible. It lingers as a testament to Rowling's willingness to complicate her world, to show that even in war, justice is not just defeating the big villain, but dismantling the quiet cruelties that made his rise possible. It is a small moment, but one that echoes with the promise of a better, fairer wizarding world, and it is a moment the films, for all their spectacle, could not contain. Number 22. Harry's talk with Grindelwald. In the chilling silence of Nurmengard, a fortress once built to house his enemies and now his own prison, Gellert Grindelwald sat awaiting his reckoning. The scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is described in sparse but evocative lines. Harry enters that bleak cell in his quest to find the Elder Wand, and there, in the grim shadows of past ambition, Grindelwald refuses to help Voldemort. The book offers this moment as a strange, quiet coda to Grindelwald's legend, a glimpse of a man who once sought mastery over death but faces his own with something like dignity. Rowling writes that Grindelwald laughed at Voldemort's threats, telling him he would never have it. Even Harry senses that Grindelwald is not the monster he once was, but a man stripped bare of pretense, perhaps even feeling shame for the ruin he caused. This meeting serves as a meditation on power, on the corruption of youthful ideals, and ultimately on the possibility, however faint, of redemption. When one reads those pages, there's a jarring sense of anticlimax. Harry, desperate and half-mad from grief, pushes into a cell to confront a figure of wizarding infamy, only to find a dying old man who refuses Voldemort's demands. Rowling's lines are precise. "Kill me, then," said Grindelwald, who was grinning into the face of Voldemort. "You will not win. You cannot win. That wand will never, ever be yours." D.H. Creature 23. It's a moment that reveals Grindelwald's last stand, not as a battle of spells, but of will. The Elder Wand's location is protected not by magic, but by a defiant lie. This scene also contrasts Grindelwald's moral decline with a spark of final integrity, hinting that he understands the magnitude of what he unleashed decades before. The choice to omit this encounter from the films was not an oversight, but a deliberate act of adaptation. In cinema, tension must escalate to its peak without unnecessary digression, especially in a finale designed to pit Harry against Voldemort in ultimate moral conflict. A scene introducing Grindelwald, no matter how well acted, would risk bewildering movie-only audiences. After all, Grindelwald is not central to Harry's personal journey in the films. He is Dumbledore's shadow, not Harry's, and the film series, rightly, focuses on resolving the hero's struggle with the Dark Lord who killed his parents. Adding a new layer of philosophical complexity at that point would have softened the narrative's fierce momentum. Nevertheless, in the book, this scene is no mere detour. It is a subtle condemnation of the allure of power, a reminder that even Voldemort's quest for immortality has precedence in wizarding history. Grindelwald's final act of defiance stands as a ghostly echo of the idealistic boy he once was, the friend who debated the greater good with Albus Dumbledore. That friendship, forged in teenage arrogance, burned an entire generation. Seeing Grindelwald here forces readers to imagine him not as a caricatured villain, but as a broken man aware of his guilt. Rowling allows us to see his humanity, at last refusing Voldemort not for revenge, but perhaps in an attempt to atone for his crimes. In that dusty prison cell, Harry becomes a witness to a history he can barely comprehend. He is no longer just the boy who lived, but the heir to generations of magical conflict. Grindelwald's refusal to betray the wand's location is an act of rare moral courage from a man who once plunged the world into terror. Harry, haunted by deaths all around him, sees in Grindelwald a complicated lesson. Voldemort has no shame, no capacity for learning. Grindelwald, in the end, has nothing left but the ability to deny Voldemort what he wants. The narrative gives us this sharp irony. The Elder Wand's bloody history ends with an old man choosing, for once, not to cause more death. For the film's climax, such an interlude would have derailed the tone. The movies chose to maintain Voldemort's pure, remorseless threat by avoiding any hint that his quest might be thwarted by moral resistance. Had they included Grindelwald, it would have complicated Voldemort's terrifying, almost elemental evil with a reminder that even dark wizards can change. The filmmakers wanted viewers to see Voldemort as the absolute end of the line, the culmination of cruelty unchecked. Grindelwald's refusal would have suggested nuance, even the possibility of repentance, a distraction from Harry's stark, desperate pursuit of victory at any cost. But that omission also flattens the ethical terrain of Rowling's world. Grindelwald's final stand isn't about redemption in a sentimental sense. There is no forgiveness, no absolution for him. Instead, it's a moment of personal responsibility. He doesn't beg for mercy or make grand confessions. He simply denies Voldemort what he wants. It's as if Rowling suggests that even the worst can choose at the last not to enable more evil. The line, you will not win, you cannot win, carries the weight of a prophecy, a dying curse, spoken not with dark magic, but with weary moral clarity. In Grindelwald's voice, we hear the voice of someone who finally recognizes the horror of his life's work. For Harry, this scene is another confrontation with death itself. He's seeking answers about a wand built to master death, and he finds a man waiting to die. Grindelwald's indifference to Voldemort's threats shows how little fear remains in someone who has faced the ruin of his ideals. The films preferred to keep Harry's quest taut and visceral, focusing on Snape's memories, the march to the Forbidden Forest, and Harry's own acceptance of mortality. Adding a philosophical aside in a prison cell might have felt like slowing the heartbeat of the climax. It was an understandable choice, but it also lost something essential, the idea that even the darkest legacy might resist being used again. Rowling's decision to include Grindelwald's refusal to help Voldemort resonates as a subtle warning about the corrupting nature of ideology. Grindelwald, after all, was not a mindless killer, but a visionary who convinced himself that murder was necessary for the greater good. By showing him at the end, refusing Voldemort, Rowling offers no exoneration, but does acknowledge the complexity of evil. It is not enough to say that monsters are born, they are made, and sometimes they see what they have become. It's a truth that complicates Harry's mission, forcing him to see that stopping Voldemort is not just a matter of defeating a monster, but preventing the world from accepting monstrous ideas. There's also a haunting symmetry in Grindelwald's last words. He once sought the Deathly Hallows himself to master death, to remake the world in his image. Now he guards their secret from a man who would do the same. It's not nobility in the purest sense, but there's a tragic awareness at play. Grindelwald is protecting the world not out of love but out of regret. The films, by removing this scene, denied viewers that cold, uncomfortable grace, a final somber commentary on how the pursuit of absolute power leaves only ashes behind. Moreover, Harry's confrontation with Grindelwald in the book serves as a grim mirror to his coming duel with Voldemort. One dark wizard, older and spent, chooses silence over complicity. The other will stop at nothing to win. This contrast enriches the book's climax with thematic weight. Voldemort's failure to understand loyalty, sacrifice, and love is laid bare. He cannot even fathom why Grindelwald would lie to him. In Voldemort's worldview, fear and power are everything. Rowling uses Grindelwald to show how that worldview is ultimately hollow, even for those who once shared it. In choosing not to show this in the film, the filmmakers kept the audience's focus unbroken on Harry's personal arc. The emotional energy of the final act is built around Harry's acceptance of death, his farewell to loved ones, his journey into the forest. To interpose a meeting with Grindelwald, no matter how powerful, would have risked diffusing that narrative urgency. The filmmakers, well aware of their medium's limits, chose to tell a simpler, cleaner story, one that sacrifices some of the book's moral ambiguity for cinematic impact. Yet for readers, that moment in Nurmengard remains unforgettable precisely because it is so unsettling. Grindelwald's shame is not an apology to Harry. It is a private reckoning with himself, witnessed only by the boy he once might have called an enemy. It's a reminder that the worst among us may, in their last breath, choose not to pass evil forward. Rowling doesn't ask us to forgive Grindelwald. She simply asks us to see that even he had a choice. In that choice lies the possibility, however slim, of breaking the cycle of violence. Ultimately, the scene in the book forces us to grapple with the cost of power. It's not enough to defeat Voldemort if the world doesn't learn to reject his ideology. Grindelwald's refusal is a dark, ambiguous lesson for Harry, a warning that victory over a Dark Lord is not the same as ending the conditions that allow Dark Lords to rise. The films, in their rush toward catharsis, leave this lesson behind. But the book's readers carry it with them, that no matter how deep the fall, the final choice remains, and sometimes that choice is all the atonement there can be. Number 23, the scene in Dumbledore's office after the battle. In the smouldering ruin of the great hall, the dead were being gathered, the living were finding their families, and the future was quietly stitching itself together from broken dreams. Yet the book does not leave us there, in the raw aftermath of the battle. It gives us a crucial moment tucked away in Dumbledore's old office, where Harry Potter finally offers the truth to the people who most need to hear it. In that circular room of portraits and memories, he stands before the staff and his friends and explains exactly what happened, not just the battle itself, but the hidden war he and his closest allies had fought in silence. The Horcruxes, Voldemort's shredded soul, the Elder Wand and its dark history, Snape's sacrifice, everything laid bare so that the wizarding world could begin to heal honestly. The films chose not to show this scene, and in some ways it was a fair choice. After the crescendo of the Battle of Hogwarts, a long explanatory sequence might have flattened the emotional release. Instead, the film ends with a powerful, wordless moment of Harry snapping the Elder Wand over his knee and tossing it into the ravine, a silent vow to reject the allure of ultimate power. But in the book, Rowling offers something far less cinematic and far more human, closure through truth-telling. It is not enough that Voldemort is gone. The trauma he inflicted must be understood, and Harry knows. He cannot keep those secrets any longer. In Dumbledore's office, Harry faces McGonagall, Slughorn, Kingsley, and the battered remnants of the Order of the Phoenix. He tells them how Tom Riddle created 7 Horcruxes to become immortal, each one a calculated defilement of life itself. He tells them about the diary destroyed in the Chamber of Secrets, the ring that cursed Dumbledore's hand, the locket that nearly drove them mad, Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's lost diadem, the snake Nagini, and, with a grave finality, how he himself was the last Horcrux. This confession is not triumphant. It is weary, almost clinical, and the others listen in horrified silence. As Rowling writes, he told them everything. It took a long time, and at the end, no one said anything. The weight of it hangs in end. The air like poison finally vented. Harry also explains why Dumbledore never tried to wield the Elder Wand for good, and why he himself intends to end its bloody legacy. In the book, the Elder Wand is not just a tempting weapon, it is a story of hubris and murder. "I'm putting it back where it came from," Harry says. "If I die a natural death, its power will be broken." He does not destroy it in a single dramatic gesture, but chooses to return it to Dumbledore's tomb. This slower, more considered choice is rooted in humility, in understanding the corrupting nature of power. The room of assembled witches and wizards hears it and understands that power, even for the noblest cause, carries a price. It is a mature and moral ending that respects the intelligence of the reader. One of the most powerful elements of this scene is how Harry vindicates Snape in front of everyone. For 7 books, Snape was the story's great question mark, the ambiguous double agent whose true loyalty was hidden even from his closest allies. In the film, Harry gives a brief personal eulogy for Snape's memory, but the others are left ignorant. In the book, Harry refuses to let the truth die in silence. He makes them see Snape's last, desperate actions, how he gave Harry his memories so the truth could be known, how he worked for Dumbledore all along, how he loved Lily Potter beyond the grave. "He was Dumbledore's man," Harry says quietly, and the words are like a benediction, a confession to a world that has no idea how many debts it owes. This is no easy absolution. Harry does not paint Snape as a saint. He acknowledges the cruelty, the bitterness, the old resentments, but he forces the truth into the light so that Snape can finally be seen for what he was, not good, not bad, but devastatingly human. In that moment, Hogwarts itself begins to heal, because the lies and half-truths are stripped away. The staff and students learn they had been protected not only by the famous Dumbledore's army or the Order of the Phoenix, but by a man they had despised. It is the messy, difficult truth that allows real closure. The films understandably feared this long reckoning would derail the final emotional beat. Cinema thrives on visual symbolism and streamlined storytelling. Watching Harry destroy the Elder Wand without fanfare is a clean, resonant image of rejecting tyranny. But in the book, Rowling resists that simplicity. Her Harry is not a legend but a boy who has seen too much and refuses to leave his world in ignorance. He knows that wars don't end simply because the villain is dead. The scars remain, and they must be talked about if there is any hope of moving on. That is why she gives him the dignity of that moment in Dumbledore's office. When Harry explains he was a Horcrux, there is no applause. No one thanks him. They simply sit there, confronting the horror that their hero was also the enemy's anchor. It is a profound narrative risk. Rowling does not allow him to be a perfect savior. Instead, she makes him the final sacrifice of Voldemort's twisted plan. That knowledge is painful for his friends and teachers to hear, but it is necessary. Without it, they would celebrate blindly, never realizing how close they came to losing everything forever. The moment also functions as a crucial thematic echo of Dumbledore's own failings. In the office he once ruled, Harry confesses that Dumbledore kept secrets, manipulated events, and sacrificed lives in the hope of a greater good. Harry does not deny this. He shares it openly, letting the others judge. In doing so, he breaks the cycle of secrets and half-truths that allowed Voldemort to rise in the first place. Dumbledore's portrait watches silently as Harry does the one thing his mentor could not: trust his allies with the whole truth. It is a quiet act of moral evolution. In that scene, Rowling shows us that endings are not neat. The survivors of Hogwarts do not simply cheer and go home. They must reckon with everything that brought them there. Harry refuses to be the heroic figurehead who glosses over the cost of victory. He is the traumatized boy who ensures everyone knows exactly what that cost was. And this, in the book's final chapters, is what transforms the wizarding world from a place haunted by Voldemort's shadow to one that can begin, slowly, to forgive itself. It also grants dignity to the fallen. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Colin Creevey, and countless others did not die in vain or for some lie. Their deaths were part of a brutal, honest fight against evil. By sharing the truth of the Horcruxes and the Elder Wand, Harry gives their sacrifice meaning. He shows the survivors that they fought a real enemy, that they were not just pawns in Dumbledore's secret game. It is a necessary act of respect for the dead. And so the book offers this gift of uncomfortable knowledge. It asks its readers, just as Harry asks the Hogwarts staff, to look unflinchingly at the moral compromises made in war. Harry does not excuse Dumbledore. He does not excuse himself. He simply tells the truth, allowing the survivors to decide how to carry it. In that moment, Hogwarts becomes not just a school, but a witness to history. The walls that saw so many horrors now also hold this fragile promise of honesty. The films, in contrast, end with a wordless victory. It is cinematic, even beautiful. Harry breaks the Elder Wand, a single perfect act that tells the audience he will not be corrupted. But it is also evasive. It refuses to burden the viewer with the complexity of Dumbledore's plan, Snape's sacrifice, Harry's own nature as a Horcrux. It says, "The battle is over, you may rest now." Rowling's text refuses such comfort. It demands that the reader share Harry's burden, even when it hurts. Harry's truth-telling in Dumbledore's office is not dramatic in the usual sense. There is no duel, no pyrotechnics. The tension comes from watching respected adults confront the awful reality they never guessed. It is a scene about moral courage, the bravery not to fight but to confess. Harry stands before survivors who lost everything and says, in effect, "You deserve to know why." That is his final service to them, even more than killing Voldemort. It is also a moment of profound loneliness. Even as he explains, Harry understands that no one can truly share what he went through. Ron and Hermione were with him, but the others see only the result. They cannot fathom the nights in forests, the terror of the locket, the scream of Nagini striking. Harry speaks, so they will know, but he also knows they will never fully understand. That is the price of surviving a war few were even aware was being fought. This scene in the book stands as a quiet rebuke to triumphalism. Harry is not crowned a king, not praised as a savior. He is a boy who tells the truth and then walks away. When Kingsley asks him about the Elder Wand, Harry's answer is stripped of drama. He will put it back. No speeches about destiny, just a decision not to repeat the mistakes of the past. It is so unglamorous that it becomes heroic. Rowling writes, "I'll put it back where it came from." That's all, a small sentence with the weight of the world behind it. And in this way, the book earns its ending. Not through spectacle, but through honesty. By showing this scene, Rowling allows the characters to choose understanding over ignorance. She lets them begin to heal. The film trades this slow, painful catharsis for a simpler grace note, an image of Harry rejecting power. Both choices have their merit. But the book's choice is braver. It refuses to lie to us about what it means to win a war. Number 24, Crabbe and Goyle in the Room of Requirement. In the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, the Room of Requirement transforms into one of the most haunting stages of tragedy in the entire Harry Potter saga. While the films chose to simplify this moment, the book offers a grim reminder of the war's real cost. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione desperately search for the lost diadem of Ravenclaw, they are not alone in their mission. Draco, Malfoy, Vincent Crabbe, and Gregory Goyle corner them, intent on seizing Harry and earning favour with Voldemort. Tension mounts quickly, and Crabbe's choice to use the Fiendfire curse is a fatal one. J.K. Rowling describes this horrifying fire as a monstrous tide of flame, billowing in all directions and bearing living forms, serpents, chimeras, and dragons, all made of blazing fire. It's a spectacular and terrifying magic that even accomplished wizards fear to use, and Crabbe is far from ready to control it. As the flames roar through the piled mountains of hidden things, the three Slytherins and Harry's friends all run for their lives. Crabbe's loss of control is immediate and total. Rowling writes, Crabbe was screaming, his wand forgotten, dropped, and he was clawing at the air, trying to escape the wall of living fire. There is no chance to save him. The fire consumes him in seconds. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Draco, and Goyle only escape by seizing old brooms and flying desperately through the collapsing mountains of burning junk. The Fiendfire devours everything, destroying the Horcrux they sought, while also delivering a brutal lesson about dark magic and the recklessness of war. This scene is particularly striking in the book because it subverts the expectations readers may have of Crabbe as just a mindless bully. While he remains antagonistic to the end, his death is not celebrated. It is horrifying, a stark reminder that the conflict spares no one. Even Voldemort's allies are vulnerable to the terror he's unleashed on the world. Rowling does not flinch from showing the violence of Crabbe's demise. She uses this moment to underline the message that war is not heroic adventure, but something that breaks people, kills children, and destroys even those who believe themselves invulnerable. When the filmmakers adapted Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, they faced a genuine dilemma with this scene. Jamie Waylett, the actor who portrayed Vincent Crabbe in the first 6 films, was unable to return due to legal issues. Rather than recast him for one movie or rewrite a major CGI-heavy scene for a new actor, the production made a pragmatic choice. They replaced Crabbe with Blaise Zabini, a Slytherin who had been only a background presence in the films so far. This decision altered the emotional power of the scene significantly. Instead of watching a familiar face die horribly, viewers only see Harry and his friends rescue Draco and Blaise from a much simpler fire. The simplification of this scene was also driven by production costs and time constraints. Filming a giant magical fire that takes the shape of living creatures is an expensive and technically complex undertaking. Creating the Fiendfire as Rowling envisioned it, vast, sentient, consuming everything in its path, would have required significant resources at a moment when the production was already committed to large-scale battle sequences throughout Hogwarts. Instead, the movie reduced the flames to an ordinary blaze, threatening but manageable, with none of the supernatural horror that defines the Fiendfire in the book. For readers of the series, this change felt like a real loss. In the novel, Fiendfire is not just dangerous, it is the ultimate dark spell that even Voldemort fears. Hermione had warned about it earlier. You'd have to be a fool to try and control Fiendfire. It's nearly impossible. Crabbe's arrogance and ignorance lead him to try anyway, and it kills him. That moment is deeply symbolic. It's the perfect illustration of what Voldemort's world teaches his followers: use power at any cost, no matter whom it destroys. In killing Crabbe, Fiendfire is both weapon and judgment. It embodies the dangers of dark magic and shows that Voldemort's path is suicidal even for his most devoted allies. The loss of Crabbe also transforms Draco Malfoy's arc in a subtle but powerful way. In the book, Draco is visibly shocked and horrified by Crabbe's death. He loses control of the situation he thought he was manipulating. He has to rely on Harry, Ron, and Hermione to save his life. Rowling describes the rescue vividly. Harry seized Draco's arm and pulled him onto the broom while Ron and Hermione did the same for Goyle. This forced cooperation shatters the illusion of Slytherin superiority. Even Malfoy's sneering leadership collapses in the face of real danger. It's a critical moment of humility for Draco, making his later behavior more believable when he hesitates to identify Harry at Malfoy Manor or refuses to curse him outright. By replacing Crabbe with Blaise Zabini, the film loses this entire dimension. Blaise does not die. The fear of dark magic's consequences is absent. The moral lesson that even loyal Death Eater sympathizers can die from their own violence disappears. Without Crabbe's death, Draco's panic and helplessness have much less weight. The rescue becomes merely a set piece of Harry's moral decency. He saves even his enemies, but it loses the raw horror and tragedy that make the scene so memorable in the book. Moreover, Crabbe's death serves as a dark mirror to the other sacrifices happening at Hogwarts. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, and Tonks all die fighting for what they believe in. Crabbe dies for nothing, for ignorance and hatred. His demise is not noble, but it is no less real. Rowling uses this to remind us that war does not just kill heroes, it kills the foolish and the cruel. It kills children raised on hate who never had the chance to learn better. The room of requirement becomes their grave, and Fiendfire their funeral pyre. It is easy to see why the filmmakers chose the simpler version. The actor was unavailable, the CGI would have been expensive, the film already ran long and needed to keep pace. From a production standpoint, their decision was fair. But the artistic cost remains. Viewers of the movie get a taste of the threat but not its full horror. They see the room burn but do not see it devour. They see Harry save Draco but not Draco's terror at watching a friend die in front of him. In many ways, Crabbe's use of Fiendfire is one of the darkest moral lessons in the entire Harry Potter series. The curse is so violent it is nearly alive, responding to hatred with monstrous hunger. When Crabbe casts it, it is not just a dangerous spell, it is an expression of his own rage and fear. Rowling writes of the fire creating huge, flaming beasts that seem to hunt the room's inhabitants. The magic itself reflects the ugliness of the caster's intent. It is dark magic with a will of its own, reminding readers that evil acts cannot be controlled once unleashed. Without this in the movie, the idea of the Room of Requirement as a place of ultimate secrets and danger is weakened. In the book, it becomes a tomb not just for lost treasures, but for lost lives. It shows how even Hogwarts itself can turn deadly when used for hate. Crabbe's final act of violence literally destroys centuries of hidden objects, erasing history in an orgy of fire. It is the ultimate metaphor for Voldemort's reign, destruction for its own sake, consuming everything, even his own followers. The scene's power in the book lies in its grotesque beauty and its pitiless finality. Harry can't save Crabbe, nor can Draco. There is no second chance or redemption. It is a moment of pure consequence. Rowling refuses to sentimentalize it or grant Crabbe any last words of regret. He dies screaming in terror, abandoned by the magic he thought would make him powerful. This is war stripped of glamour, and it is one of the most effective anti-war statements in the series. Ultimately, the film's version retains the skeleton of the scene. Harry and friends rescue Draco, and an ally from a burning room, but it is sanitized, safer, and far less meaningful. The decision made sense under the circumstances, but it deprives the audience of one of the most important lessons in the final book, that evil destroys itself as surely as it destroys its enemies. Crabbe's death is not heroic, but it is necessary to understand the price of following Voldemort's path. Even his supporters can burn in the fire they help ignite. Number 25, Harry and Ron, working at the Ministry. Harry Potter's path after the Battle of Hogwarts did not end with triumph at dawn, but unfolded into a quieter, harder story that the films chose to leave in the shadows. The books give us only a whisper of it, in that simple, almost offhand detail from J.K. Rowling. Harry became head of the Auror office, and Ron also joined as an Auror before eventually helping George run Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. It is a telling revelation in the 19 years later epilogue, hinting at work that was no less heroic for being slow and bureaucratic. If the films had tried to show it, ministry corridors, parchment quills, long hours rewriting policy, they would have risked draining the magic from the closing image on platform 9 3/4, where the next generation is sent forth in hope. By choosing not to depict that labour, the filmmakers preserved a tone of wonder and closure that the adult world seldom allows. In the book, Rowling describes a ministry reformed from top to bottom, with Kingsley Shacklebolt as the new Minister for Magic and Harry helping transform the Auror office into something better than the old corrupt machinery it had been. Harry, the boy who broke all the rules for good reasons, now had to enforce them fairly. We know from Rowling's later interviews that he made sure dark magic could never rise in the same way again, even as he carried his own scars. Imagine those years, the boy who refused to kill unless he had to, learning how to wield institutional power with care. The films never show that, and wisely so, because this burden of responsibility would have overwhelmed the quiet, elegiac note of the final scene with Albus Severus Potter, afraid of being sorted into Slytherin. The movies chose poetry over paperwork, promise over process. The image of Ron Weasley behind a ministry desk is almost jarring to consider on screen. The Ron we know is loyal, funny, impulsive, a battlefield friend who has never loved homework. Yet in the canon, he becomes an Auror too, joining Harry to help root out the remaining Death Eaters and keep the wizarding world safe. Rowling has said Ron later left to help George at the joke shop, which thrived after Fred's death in bittersweet tribute. This detail reveals that Ron wasn't entirely made for the ministry grind. He needed that freedom and laughter again, but even he took up the badge and wand for a time, honouring his family's sacrifices. To show all this in the film would have required not a scene, but an entire epilogue of its own, disrupting the narrative's emotional climax. If the movies had attempted to dramatize Harry and Ron at work, they would have had to depict the ministry's transformation from a fear-riddled, biased bureaucracy to a force for genuine justice. This is the same ministry that once imprisoned Sirius Black without trial, persecuted Muggleborns under Umbridge, and issued cowardly denials about Voldemort's return. To redeem it was a monumental task. We know from the books that Kingsley, as minister, cleaned house, but that would have meant Harry testifying in courtrooms, overseeing arrests of former Death Eaters, arguing about sentencing. The story would have changed genres, from fantasy adventure to political drama. For a family audience, saying goodbye to Hogwarts, that was too large a tonal shift. There's something fitting in leaving that work off-screen. The films end with Harry sending his own son to Hogwarts, saying all was well, the words Rowling gives us in the final line of the book. It's an illusion, of course, a promise that the worst is over, but not that evil is gone forever. By avoiding Harry's job in the ministry, the films preserve that illusion. We're allowed to part from him at a moment of peace. The adult Harry who must deal with corruption, who must arrest people he once fought beside if they relapse into dark magic, who must train new auras and deal with bureaucratic infighting. That man is too complex to share space with the sentimental goodbye. Cinema needs clarity. The page can hold contradictions. When we read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, as that rush of finality after Voldemort's fall in the Great Hall, Harry repairs his own wand with the Elder Wand, refusing its power. He speaks to Dumbledore's portrait about returning it. There is closure, but not perfect repair. Hogwarts is half ruined. The dead are mourned. The epilogue jumps forward, skipping the work of reconstruction. Rowling deliberately avoids showing that middle stretch, letting us imagine it instead. Even in print, she understood that depicting Harry's and Ron's working lives in detail might cheapen the sacrifice that got them there. It's an invitation for readers to imagine the complexity, an invitation. The films could not extend in the same way without losing pace and tone. In the films, we see Harry look older, with tired eyes, as he hugs Ginny and watches Albus Severus board the train. It is a brief, tender moment that tells us everything and nothing. By not showing his role in the ministry, the film makes that moment universal. Any parent, any adult, sending off a child into the unknown. It's easy to see why this choice was made. To show Harry in aura robes chasing down surviving snatchers or signing off on arrests would have felt like an entirely different movie, one that couldn't be squeezed in after the Great Hall's morning candles and Neville's defiant stand. It would have broken the spell. Consider, too, that Harry's adult job is not a cinematic, flashy wizard career. He is not teaching at Hogwarts, where we could reuse familiar sets and classmates. He is in an office. Even if it's the Aura office, it's a ministry department, cubicled, bureaucratic, filled with paperwork and training schedules. The idea that the boy who lived grows up to enforce magical law might resonate with older readers who understand the burden of keeping peace, but it wouldn't satisfy younger viewers wanting a mythic finale. The films chose wisely in framing the ending around family, hope, and cyclical renewal, rather than the grind of making the wizarding world safe. That final book, quote, "All was well," has layers. We know well does not mean perfect or easy. Rowling herself expanded on it in interviews, describing how Harry revolutionized the Aura office, making sure no one abused power as Umbridge had. Harry is now head of the Aura office. He really revolutionized it, she said. This implies countless battles, not with wands, but with policy. Meetings with Kingsley, debates about who could be trusted, vigilance against complacency. These are the quiet, grown-up heroics that rarely make thrilling cinema. The films chose to leave them unspoken so that Harry's final moment would speak to everyone who has ever wished for peace after chaos. Ron's path is even more telling. He is, in many ways, the heart of the trio. After a short time as an Aura, he opts out. He joins George at the joke shop, rebuilding the Weasley family's laughter in the face of devastating loss. Imagine showing that on screen. Would we have to see him wrestling with the decision to leave the ministry? A scene with George asking for help? A goodbye to Harry in the Aura office? Each of these would have needed emotional weight. Instead, the films kept Ron's role focused on friendship and family. By the time he waves to Rose boarding the train, he is simply a father and husband. No need to explain his career. The choice is elegant, if incomplete. We might also remember how much the ministry itself was a character in the books. It is not merely a backdrop, but a moral test. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry learns how power can be cruel, how propaganda works, how easy it is for good people to be silent. Rowling does not redeem the ministry instantly. She makes its renewal part of the older generation's duty. Harry and Ron accepting jobs there is not a reward, but a mission. It shows they understand victory isn't final, that it demands vigilance. But to show that in film would mean depicting bureaucracy as heroism, a difficult sell for a grand finale. Nor can we forget the weight of the dead. Tonks and Lupin, Fred, Colin Creevey, the wizarding world lost so many. Harry and Ron taking Auror jobs is partly penance. They do not leave the battlefield just because the last duel is won. This unglamorous responsibility is essential to their character's arc, but too somber for a last movie scene meant to inspire. On screen, the dead are remembered with solemn shots in the Great Hall, but then the epilogue asks us to move forward, to let the children have hope. Adding shots of Harry's office, Ron's training sessions, it would have anchored us in mourning when the goal was release. One of the greatest strengths of the books is their willingness to admit that happily ever after isn't simple. The films echo this truth subtly. Harry's lined face in the final scene, Ginny's calm worry, Ron's fond banter. They hint at lives lived under shadow, with memories that never fade. The decision not to show the ministry work respects the audience's ability to imagine it. We know Harry didn't stop fighting even if we don't see it. That unspoken labour is his last gift to the wizarding world. It is tempting to wish for an extra scene. Harry in his office, Kingsley congratulating him, Ron rolling his eyes at a stack of forms. But the filmmakers understood that this was not the story they were telling. They chose instead the universal image of parents letting go, of generations turning. By leaving Harry's ministry years in the realm of imagination, they let every viewer supply their own understanding of what it means to live on after war. It is a storytelling mercy, letting us say goodbye at the train station without having to watch the world's inevitable compromises. The truth is that Harry's adult work is heroic precisely because it's mundane. He became the man who would never let another Umbridge rise. Ron learned what he could handle and where he truly belonged. These arcs matter, but they do not fit into the frame of a 2-hour blockbuster. The films closed on the promise that the next generation might know fewer horrors, leaving the hard, necessary work of peace unfilmed. It was the right choice, even if it means we will always wonder what it looked like. Number 26. Visiting Luna's parents. Xenophilius Lovegood stood as one of the most fascinating figures in the wizarding world, not just for his bizarre wardrobe or his unwavering belief in things like the crumple-horned snorkack, but because he offered the readers something far rarer, a view into the strange yet loving home life of Luna Lovegood. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry, Ron and Hermione arrive at the Lovegoods' eccentric tower, walls papered with the Quibbler's upside-down pages, and evidence of conspiracy theories strewn about, only to find that Luna is not there. Her father's gaunt, haunted expression betrays the truth he tries to hide. This moment, heavy with the sense of a parent's desperation, exposes Xenophilius not as comic relief, but as a father willing to betray Harry to save his daughter. The films, by contrast, do not include this visit, and thus the audience loses that deeply human element that transforms Luna from the odd girl on the train to someone with a family, with bonds that matter enough to risk everything for. In the book, Harry sees the painting of Luna on the ceiling, her smiling face encircled by the word friends, connected in loops and spirals, a moment that etches itself into memory with gentle devastation. This detail shows the fragile yet sincere bond she had with them. It gives a stark contrast to Xenophilius's betrayal, a betrayal not of hatred, but of terrified parental love. Rowling writes, "It was a circular room, with a ceiling painted like the night sky. And there was Luna, drawn with all the loving care of a father who thinks the world of his daughter." The films remove this complex moral dimension entirely, leaving Xenophilius Lovegood to exist only in the margins of the story, as a name mentioned in passing, rather than a man torn between loyalty and family. It is easy to see why the films chose to skip this. Explaining the Quibbler, the Deathly Hallows symbol, and Luna's abduction would have consumed precious minutes in an already packed narrative. Yet that omission changes the texture of Luna's arc. In the books, she is not merely an eccentric sidekick. She is a prisoner, a bargaining chip in Voldemort's brutal regime. She is the reason Harry has to escape a trap set in a house filled with secrets and desperation. Without that visit, the films cannot show the moment of Luna's return home after the Battle of Hogwarts, the narrative grace note that signals the war's true cost and ultimate hope. It is quietly powerful in the book. A girl who spent months in captivity returns to her father's arms, and finally, they can rebuild. Even Rowling makes this explicit in later clarifications, noting Luna eventually marries Rolf Scamander and has a family of her own, but that healing begins the moment she is freed and reunited with her father. In the films, she simply smiles at the end in Hogwarts ruins, and nothing more is said of home. It is understandable why David Yates and Steve Kloves would avoid that entire subplot. Their final films were already split in two to handle the monumental weight of plot threads, Horcruxes, the Elder Wand, Dumbledore's backstory, Snape's truth. Adding the Lovegood visit would have demanded introducing Xenophilius properly with his offbeat loyalty, strange beliefs and hidden desperation, and they would have had to show Luna's abduction, then her silent trauma on return, risking tonal whiplash between the horror of Malfoy Manor and the final battle. The films chose to streamline, turning Luna into a figure of calm, ethereal wisdom who offers comfort to Harry without delving into the price. She paid for it, but in doing so, the films lost the subtext of Xenophilius's betrayal, which is not mere cowardice, but the essence of the war's moral corrosion. He betrays Harry because the regime has his daughter. He is not evil, only terrified. His quivering desperation becomes an indictment of Voldemort's power, the ability to break people not through ideology, but through the most basic of human fears. That is what makes his character tragic, rather than villainous. In the book, Harry understands it even as he feels the sting of betrayal. When Harry sees the mural of Luna on the ceiling, he realizes how much Xenophilius loves her, how the betrayal comes from love twisted by fear. The film's omission leaves Harry's understanding of Luna flat, reducing her to the Loony nickname, rather than a survivor with a home worth fighting for. It is also a loss for the portrayal of Luna herself. In the novels, Luna's strangeness is not a joke. It is a coping mechanism, a worldview shaped by tragedy, her mother's death, the cruelty of peers, and the terror of abduction. When she tells Harry at Dobby's grave, "I'm sorry about your friend," there is a painful understanding in her eyes, not just otherworldly calm. Rowling gave her that gravitas through the Lovegood visit, where we see that even the most unconventional families can fracture under pressure, that eccentricity is no shield from evil. Without that moment, film Luna floats above the war, offering cryptic comfort without ever seeming affected by it. Films also skip over Xenophilius's role in explaining the Deathly Hallows symbol, a moment that unpacks not just the plot but the mythology of wizarding culture. In the book, he tells them about the Peverell brothers, making the Hallows real rather than Dumbledore's private obsession. By cutting that scene, the films shift the burden of exposition to Hermione's convenient reading, reducing the legend to another clue in the scavenger hunt of Horcruxes. Xenophilius's willingness to sell out Harry while explaining the Hallows creates one of the story's best contrasts: knowledge offered in bad faith, truth bought at the price of betrayal. It forces Harry to confront how even truth can be weaponized under tyranny. It is also in that visit that Harry fully understands what Voldemort has done to the world. Until then, the trio are fugitives, in the abstract, camping, bickering, following leads. At the Lovegood house, the horror becomes personal. Xenophilius's twitchy, untrustworthy behavior is not because he is a Death Eater, but because he is a father who has no other choice. It hammers home what the Snatchers are, what the Ministry under Voldemort is. Rowling writes, "He was breathing fast now, looking wildly from Hermione to Harry to Ron, and Harry realized in horror that he was hoping to hand them over in exchange for his daughter. That revelation deepens the war's stakes in a way no battle scene can." Moreover, the return of Luna to her father at the book's end gives readers the closure that the films deny. After the Battle of Hogwarts, it matters that these families, even the strange ones, have a chance to heal. Rowling does not offer a saccharine happily ever after, but she does show that survival includes rebuilding. That is why she takes the time to mention Luna reconnecting with Xenophilius. It is an answer to the question, what do they fight for? Not just to kill Voldemort, but to make it safe to go home. Without that beat, the films end on a celebration of victory that can feel hollow. The books remind us that the real work begins afterward. The Lovegood subplot also serves to humanize the Deathly Hallows themselves. In the book, they are not simply magical MacGuffins, but symbols with believers and heretics, secret histories, and family legends. Xenophilius embodies that folklore scholar who, despite his wackiness, holds a piece of truth everyone else dismisses. His role in teaching the trio about the Hallows adds a layer of moral ambiguity, how truth can be lost, distorted, or weaponized. The films simplify this, giving Hermione the answer and pushing past the moral murk to get to the next fight. That choice makes sense for pacing, but loses thematic richness. Even the setting of the Lovegood house matters. Rowling describes it as a towering, rickety building full of personal oddities, dirigible plum trees outside, walls lined with hand-painted symbols. It is a physical manifestation of Luna's mind, creative, offbeat, unapologetic. By taking us there, the book allows us to see Luna not just as a Hogwarts oddball, but as someone who grew up in a place where her imagination was nurtured. That visit explains her resilience, her ability to see thestrals, her calm in the face of terror. Without showing that environment, the films reduce her to a series of quirky lines delivered in Evanna Lynch's dreamy voice. There is also a deep tragedy in Xenophilius's actions that resonates with other betrayals in the series, like Peter Pettigrew's. But unlike Pettigrew, Xenophilius is not motivated by selfishness or cruelty. His betrayal is arguably more painful because it is rooted in love. He is a father who breaks moral codes because he cannot bear to lose his child. It complicates the stark good versus evil dynamic of the war, showing how even the best people can be forced into impossible choices. Rowling's willingness to show that nuance is one of the series' greatest strengths. The films, in trimming that nuance, inevitably flatten the world a little. Finally, skipping the Lovegood visit also removes one of Harry's great moments of empathy. In the book, even after Xenophilius tries to hand them over, Harry does not hate him. He understands. It is a painful but important lesson about the cost of war. Xenophilius's portrait of Luna on the ceiling is not just a set piece but a testament to a father's love, and Harry, who lost his own parents so young, feels its weight. That scene reminds us that the wizarding world is not populated by heroes and villains alone, but by scared parents, desperate families, and people trying to survive in terrible times. Without it, the films risk turning the war into spectacle rather than tragedy.